During the war between England and France, the French people were in great distress because their army had been defeated. They comforted each other, saying that even if they had failed, France was protected by God. They believed they would be able to counterattack the English soon and put an end to this war. While everyone was so worried, Renzi, a boy studying at a school of magic, ran to an old bookstore. He opened the door and entered naturally, as if he was already very familiar with the place. The bookstore owner told him he came here every day like this and asked if he never got tired of it, saying he wouldn't let him in anymore. Renzi didn't care about what the bookstore owner said. He was eager to know what the book in the man's hand was. The man threw the book toward him and said it was a book he couldn't read. Having the book in hand, Renzi told him to put it on his tab, then quickly ran up to the second floor. Renzi called down to say thank you, master. However, the bookstore owner replied that he was just an old shopkeeper, not anyone's master. In class, the teacher was talking to the students about the war. France had been invaded by its neighboring country since the previous century, and up to now, it had been nearly 80 years. The teacher added that future historians would certainly call this the 100 Years' War. The classmates were all attentively listening, except for Renzi's seat, which was empty. It seemed he didn't come to class today. Renzi was engrossed in reading the book he had just received from the bookstore owner when a blonde girl came to find him. This girl was Riquimont. She came to remind him that he was the lowest scorer in the class in military strategy, martial arts, and horsemanship. Moreover, due to his many absences, he might fail the subjects. She also mentioned he was researching heresy, which was extremely concerning. Renzi said it wasn't heresy, but alchemy. Right after that, a pink-haired young lady also came to look for Renzi. Her name was Charlotte. Not seeing Renzi there, she guessed Riquimont must have arrived earlier and taken him away. The black-haired girl accompanying the elegant lady was Philip. She wondered why someone like Renzi was so famous. At this time, Charlotte and Renzi were having a meal together in the cafeteria. Renzi said that mastering the Philosopher's Stone was the ultimate secret. That stone would grant its master immortality. This meant that if he mastered alchemy, no one would have to lose their life to war anymore. He had said this 100 times already, making Riquimont no longer react at all. She asked if he planned to buy every magic book he could find. He admitted that was exactly what he would do. He had read many such books, and most of them were written in coded symbols. If it weren't for the old bookseller, he wouldn't have understood what was written inside. Rumor had it that man was Nicholas Flamel, an extremely famous alchemist. He always pretended to know nothing. Renzi hurriedly cut him off, wanting him to return to the reality that their France was being invaded by England. As nobles, they had the mission to become knights and end this war. But he wanted to save people, not take lives through war, even the lives of enemies. He wanted Riquimont to go with him tonight to a special place. Charlotte and Philip happened to meet them at the gate and wanted to join in. The four of them rode horses together into the forest. Renzi said he had seen fairies with his own eyes, and he wanted to find out where those fairies were. Fairies were considered the minions of demons and were hunted by the church. So why did Nicholas Flamel keep them with him? He guessed the fairies might be related to alchemy. If the old man refused to teach him, he would search and learn on his own. He would go ask the fairies about that magic. Philip asked if the fairies wouldn't bite people. Charlotte took this chance to tease Philip, saying she had once heard of someone being bitten on the finger by a fairy, and the fairy even crawled into their mouth and ate their organs. Those words terrified Philip. Charlotte wondered why people were always nicer to Philip than to her. Renzi said it was because she always caused trouble. At that very moment, a loud noise rang out, causing the entire group to panic and back away. Renzi quickly pulled the weak Philip into a small corner to hide. A group of English soldiers suddenly attacked them. Riquimont and Renzi immediately fought back. As soon as Riquimont was threatened by them, Renzi threw a homemade chili bomb at them to create a distraction. Charlotte came up with a plan. She told the English soldiers that Renzi was the top disciple of the famous Nicholas Flamel, and if they didn't retreat, he would turn them into stone. When everything was over, the four of them gathered around a fire in the forest. They didn't expect English soldiers to have infiltrated so deeply into France. Riquimont hoped that peace like this moment could last forever, that they could continue to study together. but she was a noble of Brittany, Charlotte was of French royalty, and Philip was of the royal family of Burgundy. They were living in a very difficult era, and one day they could become political rivals or perhaps live and die together on the battlefield. But if possible, she hoped they could always remain friends. Together, they made a vow to always be friends. The maid reminded Charlotte to understand her role. She was of noble blood and might one day inherit the throne. That girl wanted to follow Charlotte and become her student. Suddenly, Charlotte heard the sounds of a duel in the yard. Alençon, Riquimont's younger brother, wanted to duel with Rency because he heard that the previous night Rency had put the girl he liked, Philip, in danger during their forest exploration. Riquimont received a letter from her older brother saying that the English army in Harfleur was suffering from a plague and planned to retreat to Calais. The French army would wait nearby and prepare for a decisive battle. She would participate in this battle as a representative of House Brittany. Rency very much wanted to go along, but Riquimont believed that someone as weak as him wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure on the battlefield, not being allowed to go. Rency wanted to use the Philosopher's Stone to make his childhood friend immortal. Nicolas Flamel said that turning someone immortal would easily be considered heresy. Immortality meant eternal exile and everlasting loneliness. He said he was just a humble bookstore owner and couldn't help him, and told him to seek help from someone else. The battle took place on a day of torrential rain. 2 English commanders were standing on a ridge, unsure whether they should lead the army to attack. They said the French knights would mock them for having sold their souls to the devil. Rency rode his horse to the battlefield while praying for God to save Riquimont. When he arrived, the battle seemed to have ended. There was only Riquimont's broken sword lying there. The next morning, things returned to their usual course. Philip had decided to return to meet her father. Her father told her that they had completed all the preparations to join forces with England. Meanwhile, Rency was still persistently researching to create a new method to bring Riquimont back to life. He set up a ritual altar and placed the stone in the center. Unexpectedly, the stone suddenly began to glow, and a tiny fairy girl appeared inside it. She was Astaroth, the queen of the fairies. She asked why Rency had awakened her and said that the fairy queen would never belong to humans, and for that reason, he could only be her servant. Rency agreed to that proposal. Astaroth warned Rency that if he swallowed the Philosopher's Stone, it would become poison and kill him. First, he must refine it into a liquid form known as the elixir. Doing so, once he drank it, his body would be able to withstand the toxin. Rency buried himself in that research, and when he looked back, 7 years had already passed. After the English army claimed victory at the Battle of Agincourt, they continued their march to occupy Paris, the capital of France. The French royal family was forced to flee Paris and relocate the palace to Chinon. Rency embarked on his journey. He drove his carriage to a small village, where a beautiful young girl named Jeanne was performing a ritual to pray for peace. She used fruits and food to offer sacrifices to the gods, praying that the English army would return to their country and that the war would quickly come to an end. The little fairies surrounding the girl also tried their best to throw offerings and loudly chant Jeanne's prayers. This ritual had been performed many times. They believed that if they were sincere enough, they would be rewarded. Seeing Rency approaching, the fairies panicked and ran toward the cave entrance to hide. Rency said he meant no harm and encouraged them not to be afraid. He introduced himself as an alchemist who had traveled through many places to reach here. Astaroth crawled out from Rency's hat and said they could use the ruins Jeanne was using for her prayer as a place to train. It was the first time the little fairies had ever seen a winged fairy, and they were very excited. They had heard that anyone with wings must be a queen of the fairy race. Astaroth said that Rency was her slave, while he was in the cave brewing something. If he borrowed the power of these ruins, there was a good chance he would succeed in refining the elixir. Jeanne asked him if drinking the potion he was preparing would make her chest grow larger. Rency replied that it wasn't a magic potion but alchemy, a very delicate process. Because Jeanne was being mischievous, she caused Rency to mess up the proportions, which led to a massive explosion. Rency quickly shielded Jeanne with his own body. The elixir splashed onto him, causing him to be severely injured. Before losing consciousness, he remembered the vow he and his 3 friends had made years ago. When he woke up, Astaroth told him he was very lucky not to die from the elixir's poison, but his experiment had completely failed. She said he was pathetic. She had thought he would succeed in refining the elixir by following her instructions within 3 years. But 7 years had already passed without any results. Renzi demanded she return all the years of youth he had spent following her in pursuit of creating the elixir. Astaroth said that he was the chosen one meant to become the next Ulysses, the one who would put an end to all wars in the world, including the current war between England and France, and turn this world into an eternal paradise. That was why she had passed on her knowledge to him. Jeanne was standing at the door and overheard everything. She thought she was the reason he had gotten so badly injured and deeply regretted it. Renzi said it wasn't her fault, it was because he himself was talentless, and he advised her not to worry about such things. At that moment, the alarm bell rang. A girl named Hire appeared and said she had come to inform the villagers that the army would attack this region. Everyone quickly recognized that she was someone from Princess Charlotte's side and asked if she would protect them. Hire agreed to protect them if they handed over all their food supplies. Jeanne immediately ran up and hugged Hire to protect the villagers. Renzi thought the girl was being too reckless. If that woman suddenly fired her gun, Jeanne would be in danger. Upon hearing that, Hire immediately fired a shot and knocked off Renzi's hat. She wondered why there was a dark sorcerer in such a remote village. Astaroth flew out and explained to Hire that he was an alchemist. The moment she saw Astaroth, Hire was captivated by her refined beauty. To negotiate with Hire, Jeanne said that the villagers would not survive the winter if all their food was taken. But Hire said that if she didn't fulfill her mission, she wouldn't survive either. Jeanne said that Hire could survive half a year without food thanks to her chest. Renzi had always imagined Hire to be a grumpy old man, but he didn't expect her to be such a talented young woman. Suddenly, a stream of white liquid flowed out of Renzi's mouth. Astaroth said it was most likely elixir. Earlier, he had absorbed an unrefined amount of elixir and had unconsciously transformed himself into a vessel for refining it. Simply put, his body could now endure the Philosopher's Stone. He could become a Ulysses, but only for 3 minutes. His body continued to convert the elixir, which caused a reaction with the Philosopher's Stone, leading to it spiraling out of control. At that moment, he could die from being overtaken mentally. Then, a red-haired commander named Zaintrails entered the church and informed everyone that the enemy had attacked them. He also handed Renzi a large sword and told him to go out and fight. The battle outside was extremely fierce, with Hire's army trying to stop the enemy from entering the town. Inside the church, Renzi remained calmly seated. The townspeople asked if he couldn't fight with a sword. Then perhaps he could at least use dark magic to help them. He considered directly transferring the elixir to Hire by mouth so she could win the battle. But since she was a mercenary soldier, giving her such immense power might only complicate things further. The fairies were on their way to flee the village, but one of them thought of Jeanne. They felt they couldn't leave her alone there and decided to return and fight to protect her. Hearing the fairies' voices, Jeanne ran out to check the situation, only to witness them being brutally slaughtered by enemy soldiers. Renzi didn't see Jeanne anywhere, so he went to look for her. When he found her, she had already been pierced through the body by a sword. She said she had really wanted to become a knight, but only demons could do that, so she had merely tried to end the war with her prayers. She wished she had power, then she could have protected the fairies from death. Renzi recalled what Nicholas Flamel once said: if someone were made immortal, they would be expelled from the church and seen as a heretic. Immortality meant fleeing through eternity and living in solitude forever. He decided to grant Jeanne power by placing the Philosopher's Stone inside her. He quickly split the stone, gave her elixir, and inserted half of it into her body. The process was excruciating, but once healed, she gained overwhelming strength. She alone could defeat many soldiers and even withstand a massive barrage of bullets. All the enemies were so terrified they fled. Jeanne even intended to attack Hire, but fortunately, her time as Ulysses had run out. The next day, because she had become a Ulysses, she could no longer stay in the village. The only option was to follow Renzi. He had also thought of a way for her to live more comfortably. They would spread the rumor that she was a saint destined to end the war. The English army continued to attack, forcing the French royal family to retreat from Paris. Princess Charlotte rose to become the leader of the royal house. The king died of illness, and his sons successively fell on the battlefield. As a result, the princess, though a woman, had to ascend the throne. The burden of responsibility and loneliness weighed heavily on her shoulders. She became more withdrawn and often called the name of her childhood friend, Rency. Rumors spread across the land that France had been saved by a girl. Wherever Rency went, he spread this rumor, telling people that God had ordered Jeanne to save France. He did this to rally everyone's support so that the Inquisition wouldn't label Jeanne a witch. Astaroth told him that he had more talent as a con artist than as an alchemist. He replied that all those skills had been taught to him by her. Astaroth said that he was merely her slave, so he shouldn't expect to ever tame her. Now that he could no longer become a Ulysses, she would continue keeping him by her side. Hyre sat staring at Astaroth, unable to take her eyes off her. It seemed her obsession with pretty girls had only gotten worse. Before her homeland was burned down and she lost her loved ones, she used to be a little girl named Etienne. She was likely recalling memories of her younger self. Suddenly Jeanne came running to find Rency. She said she wanted to ask him for a favor. Rency told her that he already saw himself as her older brother, so she could ask him for anything. Receiving such a warm response, she didn't hesitate and said she wanted to kiss him. Her body had been burning ever since she left the village, and her throat was extremely parched. She wanted to drink elixir, but that substance was inside Rency. These symptoms were the side effects of when Rency shattered the Philosopher's Stone. Normally, replenishing elixir only needed to happen after a few years, or even decades, but it seemed Jeanne would need to replenish it after every time she activated Ulysses. In other words, every time Jeanne transforms into Ulysses, she has to kiss Rency. At that moment, the girl had already approached Rency, but he felt very shy. He wanted to find a more secluded place to carry it out. Suddenly, an arrow struck Rency's coat. A group of enemy soldiers were ambushing them in the forest. While everyone was fending off the soldiers, Jeanne suddenly lunged forward and forcibly kissed Rency. Immediately after, she activated her Ulysses power. With that strength, she quickly took down many soldiers. However, the fact that she could only remain transformed for 3 minutes was already known by those troops. Count Tremoille received a letter addressed to Princess Charlotte, written by Rency himself. Upon hearing who wrote the letter, the Count became so enraged that he crushed the little doll in his hand. Astaroth, standing in the breeze at a restaurant, recalled what Rency had told her. He wanted to ask Princess Charlotte to grant Jeanne the title of knight. A holy maiden allied with the exiled government would boost the morale of the army and the people, and there was a chance it could end the war. He brought Jeanne to the royal palace to meet the princess. After all, it had been 7 years since they last met, so he was extremely anxious. Jeanne said the princess would understand if he explained why he hadn't come earlier. Although she tried to encourage him, the girl herself was also very nervous. She wasn't sure whether the princess would recommend her for knighthood. While they were talking, Rency suddenly disappeared. Jeanne followed a soldier to where the princess was. While Rency was captured and thrown into a dark prison, there, he met Ricimont. Jeanne was brought into the palace. Looking around, she quickly spotted where the real princess was. The princess had someone else sit on the throne in her place to test Jeanne. In the past, many people had come claiming titles and hoping to be knighted by her. However, those who lacked real ability only tarnished their own reputations. They failed to prove themselves in any field. Charlotte assumed that Jeanne would be the same as the others. To the princess, no one could save France now, not even herself. But perhaps the princess had underestimated Jeanne's abilities. The girl noticed that the one on the throne wasn't the real princess and even identified where the true princess was hiding. In the prison, Rency told Ricimont that he had heard she had escaped his army on her own. Rency had thought she became a general soon after, but to his surprise, she was imprisoned here. Ricimont asked why he never came to rescue her. That night, she had lost a battle but wasn't executed. Instead, an English general summoned her to serve as his knight. She accepted the offer. She had wanted to become a mediator between England and France. However, Henry V, the one who took her in, fell seriously ill and died soon afterward, ruining her plan. Ricimont had no choice but to return to France as a Knight of England. She endured terrible things and was eventually betrayed and defected from the English army. She had hoped Renzi would come save her, but he never showed up. The princess asked Jeanne how she had known the person on the throne wasn't truly her. Jeanne said Renzi had told her about the princess, so she had a rough idea. Jeanne also said they had sent a letter to the gatekeeper and received royal permission to enter the city. But the princess said she had never received any letter. Renzi had disappeared, and the situation was very strange. Charlotte said he had abandoned her just to bury himself in alchemy and must have forgotten the vow they made years ago. Jeanne insisted that Renzi wasn't the kind of person who would break a promise so easily. Renzi himself hadn't realized how much time alchemy would consume. He knew he was trash for not being able to save Richemont, but he still remembered the vow they had made back then. As Jeanne was encouraging the princess, an assassin suddenly arrived to kill them. The attacker shot Jeanne's arm, breaking it. The assassin kept attacking, but Jeanne used her Ulysses power to protect the princess. However, when the time limit of her power ran out, the girl fainted. It was then that the real assassin appeared. This man ordered the princess not to call for help. Only by doing so could she keep her life. His mission here was simply to retrieve the Philosopher's Stone from within Jeanne's body. The exiled French royal family in Chinon had been trying to negotiate peace, but the Duke of Burgundy was assassinated, and the relationship between the two nations once again became more tense than ever. The kind-hearted Philip had inherited his father's position after his father was assassinated. She was now on her way to Chinon on a secret mission. The Black Bear assassin told the princess that he had waited until Jeanne's power subsided. He wanted her to remain quiet because his target was not her, only the stone inside Jeanne. Hire had been paid to stay out of Jeanne's group's affairs. The girl was being brutally tortured by the assassin, who planned to tear her apart like a little rabbit. But first, he wanted her to tell him how to create elixir. He threatened that if she didn't reveal it, he would ruin the princess's beautiful face, seeing that the princess might be in danger. The girl had no choice but to tell him the method of obtaining elixir. The assassin found the method rather interesting. She said he could take the stone from her, but not hurt anyone. Renzi told Tremoille that even if they weren't particularly close, he didn't think he deserved to be treated like this by his own relatives. Tremoille wanted to hand over part of France to England in exchange for peace. He also announced that Philip would be visiting the castle today. They had no other hope except to negotiate and preserve part of France, and Philip was not suitable as a mediator. Renzi said that the Charlotte he knew would never accept surrender so easily. But the princess he knew now was very different. After witnessing too much bloodshed as the head of the palace, she had lost all hope. She locked herself away and handed everything over to Tremoille. Even when she saw Richemont locked in the dungeon, she didn't help. Charlotte had given up on humanity and everything else. Renzi believed it was his fault for abandoning her for 7 years. Because of that, the princess lost her faith in people. No matter what happened, he wouldn't let things end so meaninglessly. He didn't want any part of his country to fall into English hands, and he wouldn't go back on his promise to the 3 most important friends in his life. At that crucial moment, a Stadthof appeared in time to rescue Renzi and Richemont from the prison. Princess Charlotte had cried a lot, thinking Jeanne had died trying to save her. She decided to stop obeying the assassin and screamed loudly for help. Although Hire managed to break open the door of the room where Jeanne and the princess were being held, she couldn't shoot the assassin because if she did, Jeanne might die too. Renzi knew that the man's goal was the Philosopher's Stone, so he handed over the remaining half of the stone. The assassin wasn't foolish. He knew that the stone alone would do nothing and might even kill him. He wanted Renzi to provide him with elixir as well. Renzi gladly complied, and as soon as the assassin received a stone coated in elixir, he immediately swallowed it, hoping to gain extraordinary power. But he didn't know that elixir evaporates when exposed to air. After he swallowed it, the stone caused him to explode. Philip also arrived. The 4 old friends reunited under less than pleasant circumstances. Renzi pulled Philip aside to talk privately. She said she had come here with the intention of acting as a mediator to negotiate peace. Renzi told her not to think the war would end just because France surrendered to England. There were many branches within the royal family, and they would fight for power. This world would only become more complicated. The only way to achieve peace is to unify France. Once the throne becomes truly stable, the English army will give up, and only then can the war truly come to an end. To achieve this, Philip needs to sign a truce agreement with the French royal family and become an ally. But will Philip accept Rency's proposal when her father's vengeful spirit continues to follow and remind her of how he was assassinated by the French? Jeanne told the princess and Richemont about the Philosopher's Stone and how to activate the power of Ulysses. Hearing that the activation method was to kiss Rency, both the princess and Richemont became quite intrigued. They, too, wanted to place the stone in themselves. While they were chatting cheerfully, Philip walked in. She said she couldn't accept Rency's proposal and quickly left. Rency chased after her to try to persuade her once more. He wanted her to abandon her family's ambitions and live a truly happy life. Philip kissed Rency to obtain the elixir and then left. Although peace negotiations failed, Princess Charlotte had now regained her resolve. She would protect the sovereignty of the country at all costs. Her call to arms was also met with enthusiastic support from the people, and she would appoint Rency as deputy commander to lead the battle. However, the major problem they were facing was the lack of soldiers. Jeanne wanted to personally go defeat the English army and liberate the city, but Hire reminded her that her power only lasted 3 minutes. Moreover, it would take half a day for that power to recover. Their only hope was to wait for Richemont to return after seeking reinforcements. She was now returning to discuss this issue with her older brother. However, her brother was someone who cared little about political affairs. When she opened the door and entered his room, he was still happily entertaining his lovers. This man was extremely lustful. He didn't just have relations with one woman, but with many different women. Richemont got straight to the point, saying she wanted to borrow 2,000 troops. She had sent multiple letters requesting help, but had never received a reply, so today she came in person. Her brother claimed that he was terribly busy governing the country, but it seemed the only thing that kept him busy was women. Even while the two siblings were talking, another woman in a green dress knocked on the door because she had forgotten her undergarments. However, this girl didn't seem as unpleasant as the others. Her gaze toward Richemont was also very friendly. Without military support from her brother, Richemont had no choice but to return. She recalled what he had told her. Her brother hated war because it held no love or art. He had promised to send troops to help the French royal family, but then blatantly broke his promise. His reason was that if the English army won, all the factions of the French royal family would be severely punished. Feeling very down, she went to drink. After becoming drunk, she was kidnapped by a group of soldiers. When she opened her eyes, Richemont found herself hanging high up. These soldiers intended to violate her. Fortunately for Richemont, the girl in the green dress whom she had met at her brother's palace led a group to rescue her. After being successfully freed, the two girls opened up to each other. Richemont hadn't expected Brittany to become like this. The girl in the green dress said that when a country is thrown into chaos, people's hearts will inevitably change. She also wanted Richemont to allow her to share a few things about her brother. In the past, many people had wanted to marry Richemont for alliance, but her brother refused them all. He wanted his little sister to marry a man worthy of her, not be treated like a bargaining chip. He may not have been a good king, and he might not have cared about war, but when it came to his sister Richemont, he had used all his strength to protect her. Jeanne was now training hard to draw the royal sword that symbolizes the authority of the French royal family. Once she raised that sword, she would be able to summon loyal knights from all across France. This sword is special because the material used to forge it is none other than the legendary Philosopher's Stone. While they were talking, Count Tremoille came to request an audience. He said he had heard about the incident at the castle, and felt he had been too irresponsible for fleeing the place and abandoning Her Highness the Princess. Rency asked whether he had hired the assassin who attempted to kill the princess and Jeanne, but that assassin had committed suicide right after being captured, and there was no evidence proving that Tremoille had hired him. He also brought a report to Jeanne, falsely accusing her before the church of sleeping with a demon to obtain her extraordinary power. Richemont deeply regretted not being able to return with soldiers if she had troops. Jeanne wouldn't have to undergo that absurd virginity test. Renzi said that even though she didn't bring back soldiers, he was still happy because at least she was still the same Ricimont he knew as a child. He also advised her not to shoulder everything on her own, but to share the burden with him. He would walk with her. The people in the city were starting to question why the girl was avoiding the virginity test. The princess should stop covering for them. General Ricimont, whom they had always trusted, had failed to bring back reinforcements. Moreover, Renzi had entered the royal court as a heretical dark mage. All of this proved that the French royal family had truly declined. Count Tremoille was also harboring ambitions to reclaim his position at the palace. If not, the entire royal family would be overthrown. When he returned to the castle, he planned to add Astaroth to his collection of dolls. The incident left Jeanne blaming herself, thinking she had failed to rally an army. Renzi also felt extremely guilty, as he was the one who had led her down such a thorny path. But the girl didn't see it that way. She believed Renzi had saved her life. Her original life had already ended, and he had granted her a new one. Princess Charlotte said that the Duke of Brittany was a coward. He only sat and waited to see whether the English or French would win, making him nothing more than a disgusting parasite. From the very beginning, if Brittany hadn't rejected unification, this war would have ended long ago. These words struck Ricimont's pride. She said Brittany was the land of the Bretons, and they didn't need the French royal family to lecture them about annexation. The princess said that Ricimont's mother was essentially also a parasite. She had married the English king right after the French king died. The two argued fiercely, and Ricimont stormed off. Renzi then told Jeanne that he had promised to protect her, and so he would never marry. He would be like the legendary knights, swearing absolute loyalty to their noble lady. He wanted both of them to live a pure life together. Ricimont, standing nearby, witnessed it all. She then resigned from her post in the French royal court. In the past, she had endured many unpleasant experiences, many times being harassed and receiving indecent comments. It wasn't because she feared losing her virginity that she ran from those people. She had wanted to preserve it because she had feelings for Renzi. But now that he no longer wished to marry, the thought of it made her feel incredibly sad. After Ricimont left, the princess wanted to appoint Hire as the new general, but she declined. She couldn't drag her people to their deaths like that. That night, the citizens of the city gathered to learn the results of Jeanne's virginity test. Renzi was suppressed by the English army. Seeing this, Jeanne activated her power and went to fight them. She quickly saved Renzi and said she would take the virginity test. She absolutely would not kill anyone because she had lost her younger sister in this war. More than anyone else, Jeanne understood how precious life was. The next day, upon hearing the news, the royal guards also returned to the palace. They had resolved to fight to the end to protect peace for the world. The battle between England and France was reaching its climax at Orleans. If the English conquered that region, they would take over all of France. On the other hand, if this land is protected, the French army will be able to hold a coronation for Princess Charlotte. Renzi and Jeanne are studying a way to lead troops into the enemy stronghold. He ordered Astaroth to go and inform the commander in Orleans to prepare troops for a diversionary attack. At the Orleans fortress, they reunited with Batard. Though appearing as a girl, Batard is actually a small framed boy, a relative of the princess who has dressed like a girl since childhood. Alençon, Ricimont's younger brother, also came out to welcome Renzi. He said his sister was too selfish and had dishonored the title of knighthood. At that very moment, enemy forces launched an attack through their front line. Alençon, not wanting a young girl like Jeanne to go to the battlefield, asked Renzi to take her back. Then, wearing armor and riding a horse, he immediately charged into battle. For him, this was the chance to prove himself if he could win a battle right after his sister left. No one would think of him as a useless little brother anymore. However, things were far from as easy as he thought. A female general led the enemy army. She moved like a phantom, appearing and disappearing at will. But she didn't kill Alençon. The opponent she was truly waiting for was Jeanne. This woman's identity was Noire. Jeanne tried to pursue and destroy her to the end, but Renzi stopped her. Her power was already running out. Noire escaped, and the enemy forces also retreated from the fortress. Batard was stunned that someone as amazing as Jeanne even existed in this world. Upon hearing that the power of Ulysses was now in France, a powerful man sent Glassdale to eliminate that monster. He also hoped that next time Noir wouldn't act on her own, because they were on the same team and should act together. The next morning, Rency and Jeanne returned to the city of Domremy. The people welcomed them like true heroes. Batard never imagined Rency could capture the stronghold so quickly. He said that in war, the most important thing is command. Furthermore, during this season, strong winds often blow around the river. Just a spark could destroy the enemy fortress. As Rency was walking down the hallway, Jeanne suddenly ran up and forcibly kissed him. She said it felt like she was addicted to the elixir in his body and wanted much more of it. That action left him completely flustered. That night, he couldn't sleep at all. Astaroth said that he had gradually started seeing the girl as a member of the opposite sex, though she was just a growing child. Everyone has physical needs as a human being, and as a man, it was normal for him to develop feelings like that for her. Rency said he had to come up with a solution quickly to resolve the situation. Astaroth suggested one. She told him to take out the Philosopher's Stone, and immediately the stone projected the image of an incredibly beautiful girl. Just holding her in his arms would make him forget the feelings he had for Jeanne. However, he didn't want to do it. True love is born when two people are together and share everything. If he did that with the girl created by the stone, he would lose the chance to experience genuine love. The next day, suddenly, many citizens lost control. They said they couldn't let the English army continue doing as they pleased. They had a holy maiden on their side, and even if they died on the battlefield, they would go to heaven. With that kind of thinking, they began charging toward Tyrells. It seemed like they had lost their sense of reason, believing that with the holy maiden present, they would be completely protected. Alençon decided to lead the army to Tyrells. He couldn't let his people die meaningless deaths. Riquimon's training had not been in vain. This younger brother had an extremely logical and methodical mindset. However, Jeanne believed they couldn't follow Alençon's plan. She didn't want all her efforts the day before to save Orleans to be in vain if he used that city as a decoy. In reality, they didn't even have enough troops to launch a direct assault on the enemy's fortress. Jeanne came up with an idea. She would charge into the fortress alone. The emotions of the girl resonated with the stone inside her body and created a powerful source of motivation. Now, no one could stop Jeanne's determination. Glassdale was standing on the rooftop with a giant bow and arrow, waiting for Jeanne to appear. He showed up and loudly called for Ulysses. It seemed he was desperate to eliminate the one who carried such immense power. He said that witches and Ulysses were enemies of mankind. Since he couldn't kill them, he would turn them into ashes. Jeanne moved forward, intending to strike him from above, but he unexpectedly dodged the attack. Noir quickly seized the girl, hugging her tightly and intending to die together with her. It turned out that Noir was actually Philip in disguise. Glassdale's arrow pierced the hearts of both women. His weapon was made from the Philosopher's Stone, which earned him the title of Ulysses' Slayer. Seeing their holy maiden slain, the French army fell into chaos and began retreating from the fortress. Alençon quickly rushed in and carried Jeanne away, since Jeanne was gravely wounded on the battlefield. Rency had been living in constant fear. He even dreamed of Jeanne being in danger, calling out to him for help, but he was powerless to do anything. When he woke up, Alençon informed him that he had lost consciousness during the battle and was now at the Augustine fortress. The good news was that Jeanne was still alive. As a Ulysses, the girl had only fainted because her brain remained intact. The Philosopher's Stone had kept her alive. Rency asked Astaroth if Jeanne wasn't dead. Then there must still be a way to save her. Astaroth mentioned the demon sword, Excalibur, a Philosopher's Stone that contained a transcendent power capable of resurrecting Jeanne. Rency immediately wanted to set out to find the stone. Alençon stopped him, saying that even if Jeanne were revived, their army still wouldn't be able to withstand the English forces. Though they had been lucky enough to seize this fortress, they wouldn't be able to hold it for long. They needed reinforcements, at least 2,000 troops. Alençon wanted Rency to go home and ask his grandfather to lend soldiers for this campaign. They would try to obtain Excalibur while he returned home to persuade his grandfather he was the only one who could bring reinforcements. They split up and acted according to plan. While Alençon and Batard set out in search of Excalibur, Rency returned home to request reinforcements for the upcoming battle. At Rency's home, a beautiful girl had been waiting for him to return every single day. That girl was Catherine. Seeing him back, she was overjoyed and immediately ran to hug him tightly. Catherine loved him dearly. She had held onto all of his belongings since the day he left, and she had kept his room neat and clean, ready for his return at any moment. Their grandfather entered with an unhappy face. He had heard that Rency had come to borrow troops, so he rushed back. Rency said he wanted to borrow 2,000 soldiers. After thinking for a while, the old man said he could take as many as he wanted, but there was one small condition. He had to marry Catherine. Rency thought that strange engagement had already been annulled long ago, especially since Catherine was his cousin. However, her family was extremely wealthy, richer than even the royal family of France. If he married her, he could become a great figure in the world, and the status of his family would rise endlessly. If he refused to marry her, not even a single soldier would be lent to him. He told Catherine that he didn't expect their grandfathers still wanted him to marry her, and he was very sorry for dragging her into something so undeserved. He had no intention of involving her in an incestuous marriage, and he didn't want her to worry about the soldiers anymore. He would try to find another way to persuade his grandfather. Contrary to what he thought, Catherine wasn't bothered at all by their grandfather's words. Moreover, she herself was the one who wanted to marry him because she had secretly loved him for a long time. Even if God punished her and cast her into hell, she still wanted to obtain his love. She begged him never to leave her behind again. When Catherine was still a little girl, she had been brought to this mansion. According to Rency's grandfather's arrangement, she would be the one to marry him. His true goal was the fortune the girl had inherited from her family. When she was in despair after being kidnapped to such a frightening place, Rency appeared. He took her out to play, rode horses with her, and told her that from now on, he would be her big brother, and that they would live happily together in this place. The cousin marriage didn't succeed, and Catherine continued living in the castle as Rency's younger sister. The battle between him and France was still raging fiercely. Hire had also brought her mercenary troops to support the French royal family. Rency didn't have much time left. His grandfather gave him a deadline. Tonight, he had to sleep with Catherine. Only then would he lend him troops to return and support the French royal family. That night, a man named Nicholas came to see the grandfather. Long ago, when Rency had just been born, Nicholas had warned the old man to kill the boy, because one day he would bring calamity to the world. Nicholas said he was a child with the qualities of a monster, foretold in the writings of the apocalypse. Now, Rency also bore traits that were different from ordinary people. Rency went to Nicholas's room and apologized, saying he couldn't marry her not because of the cousin relationship, but because he had promised Jeanne that he would stay by her side forever. Catherine realized that Rency had fallen in love with Jeanne. Even if the whole world turned against him, he still wanted to devote himself to her. That was true love. All he had to do was hold her and sleep until morning, and Catherine would tell his grandfather that she had given her virginity to him so he could take the soldiers with him. Alençon said they needed to retrieve Excalibur to resurrect Jeanne. According to Astaroth, it was actually a sword sheath. Hire came to visit Jeanne, and she was deeply heartbroken to see that sweet little girl suffering from the tragedies caused by war. She firmly resolved that she and everyone else would definitely revive Jeanne. Excalibur and the reinforcements still had not appeared, but outside the fortress, the battle had become incredibly fierce. Astaroth hadn't expected the search for Excalibur to take this long, perhaps because so many years had passed. She could no longer remember where the sheath was. While Alençon and Astaroth were arguing over Excalibur's location, Batard noticed that the surrounding boulders were slowly closing in on them. Alençon didn't understand what was happening. Astaroth explained that this was a trap she had set long ago to prevent knights from finding the sword sheath. She told Alençon to raise the Philosopher's Stone, and as soon as he raised the magical stone, the giant rocks stopped moving toward them. The little fairies also began to appear when they saw the Philosopher's Stone. Astaroth explained that these fairies were of the Corrigan race 1,000 years ago. She had ordered them to protect this forest. She quickly commanded them to bring her the sword sheath, but they mistook her for a witch and had forgotten that she was actually their ancestor. After she explained the situation, the fairies led them to the place where the sheath was hidden. But strangely, the sword sheath had vanished without a trace. Astaroth quickly spotted it at the top of a tree. However, a young girl was holding it. She was Mallory, the captain of the Philosopher's Stone search unit under Duke Bedford. In other words, she was with the English army. She came from an island that was a British colony, and not long ago, her country had been annexed by the Kingdom of England. She insisted on staying in the tree and refused to hand over the sheath. A fairy ran over to inform Astaroth that many English knights were attacking. Seeing that time was running out, Astaroth wanted to seize the sheath quickly to revive Jeanne. She told Batard to help distract Mallory, and then she would attack her from above. However, Mallory wasn't that easy to fool. She had already figured out the plan and shot an arrow straight through Astaroth's body. But she never expected that Astaroth possessed an immortal life. No matter if she was harmed or tried to kill herself, she simply could not die. Astaroth quickly resurrected, flew up, pushed her down, and successfully retrieved the sword sheath. Alençon said he would stay behind and keep Mallory as a hostage to hold back the enemy troops, while Batard and Astaroth should go ahead and revive Jeanne, as doing so would greatly boost the morale of the French army. He told Batard to spread the word that he had died gloriously in battle. Since he was born, Alençon had always been compared to his older sister. Everyone always referred to him as Riquimont's younger brother. Some malicious people even mocked him, saying he was incompetent and unworthy of being Riquimont's brother. Because of that, he always had the thought in his head that his purpose in life was to surpass his sister. And finally, that moment had arrived. Everyone would have to acknowledge his talent. He would fight alone against more than 100 English soldiers. Renzi had also borrowed 2,000 troops from his grandfather. Astaroth informed him that the sword sheath was being taken back to Orleans to revive Jeanne. Suddenly, an English army blocked Renzi's path. Tremoille had traded his entire fortune to create this force. He said that if Orleans was liberated, the princess would head to Reims, and he would no longer have a chance to negotiate with England. Astaroth reminded Renzi that now wasn't the time to fight him. They had to reach Orleans as soon as possible. Tremoille kept provoking Renzi with taunts, saying that he knew exactly how Jeanne was shot through the heart and died so miserably. Alençon also arrived with his troops to support Renzi. It turned out that the night before, when he was in danger, his sister had come just in time to save him. Moreover, she brought her own army with him to Orleans to liberate the French royal family. Riquimont told Renzi not to get distracted by a pitiful loser and forget who he was. She would declare war on Tremoille to open a path for him to return to Orleans. She knew she was too strong to play the role of a noble lady waiting for a knight's protection. Therefore, she would clear the way so Renzi could go back and save the girl he loved. Renzi was deeply moved. He had just been forgiven by Catherine and now was being helped by Riquimont. He didn't know what he could possibly do to repay them. In her dream, Jeanne kept calling out Renzi's name. She said she was very lonely and afraid, always waiting for Renzi to come revive her. At that moment, Noir also awakened. She sensed that Renzi was coming, but not for her, rather for Jeanne. Although Jeanne had come into contact with the sword sheath, she still hadn't been revived. She needed Renzi's kiss to receive the elixir and awaken. After receiving Renzi's kiss, she was brought back to life. Waves of arrows from the enemy forces kept raining down on Orleans. When the French soldiers had nearly lost all will to fight, Jeanne appeared. She strongly raised the flag of the French royal family and encouraged them not to give up, that the battle was not yet over. She said that she had recovered and would continue fighting alongside everyone, vowing that she would never surrender to the English. Noir instructed Glassdale that this time, when fighting Jeanne, he should not hesitate. He must shoot straight into her head. Only by destroying the brain could a Ulysses be truly killed. Glassdale recounted how, in the past, there was an archer, a wretched man who only knew how to flaunt his skills. His showboating drew the attention of a lord who ordered him to shoot an apple off his wife's head. It should have been a simple task, but he made a fatal mistake, and the woman he loved died. He was that man, and to this day, he remained haunted by the death of his wife caused by his own hands. Noir said she was not afraid of death. She even welcomed it, because death was salvation from the suffering of a cursed Ulysses like her. Noir was, in fact, Philip, a gentle and kind Philip who, after being transformed by Rency's elixir into a Ulysses and crowned with the Holy Grail, had become the ruthless Noir. Her deceased father's soul constantly appeared around her, reminding her that she was born to be queen of the world, and she was not allowed to die until that day came. The people of Orleans wanted to open the city gates to directly attack the English base, and the English had also gathered at the gate, intending to suppress the people first. Jeanne wanted to go and assist, but Rency stopped her. She could only be resurrected once, so they didn't want her to go to such dangerous places. Rency and Astaroth told her that just encouraging the people and the French soldiers was already good enough. If anything bad were to happen to her, they wouldn't be able to face the princess. Right after that, Rency and everyone quickly headed out to battle, and Jeanne followed them immediately. She transformed into a Ulysses and ran over to fight Noir. Seeing her appear, Glassdale quickly set up a formation to assassinate her while she was engaged with Noir. Rency immediately went to get his horse and rushed to join Jeanne. The army wanted to help her while she was fighting Noir, but Jeanne refused. She wanted to defeat that despicable woman by herself. Seeing that Rency wanted to charge into battle, Alençon and the French soldiers and civilians also wanted to follow him. They said they would risk their lives for him. He told everyone that he wasn't great enough to deserve that and asked to borrow their strength, not for France, but for something more personal. He said he only wanted to keep the promises he made to his friends, and just a few days ago, he had learned what love truly was. So he wanted to say that he wished to borrow everyone's strength to rescue the girl he loved. His heartfelt plea moved thousands, and they charged toward the enemy with such overwhelming strength that even the English couldn't believe the power they had. Thanks to everyone's help, Rency quickly made it to Jeanne. Noir, aiming to crush Jeanne's fighting spirit, told her that in order to bring 2,000 troops here to fight, Rency had to marry another girl. Hearing that, Jeanne was devastated because he had broken his promise to her. He had clearly said he wouldn't marry and would stay by her side forever. Even though he explained that the marriage was only procedural to get military support, Jeanne was still furious. She felt that he only saw her as a means to fight the English. While she was distracted, Noir attacked her from behind, but failed, flinging the girl into the air, intending for Glassdale to shoot her down as she fell just like the last time. But now Rency was there. There was no way he would let the girl he loved die like that. He decided to swallow the remaining half of the Philosopher's Stone to gain the power of a Ulysses and save Jeanne. The stone he swallowed was Jeanne's other half, so now the two of them combined would create an unmatched power. Swallowing the stone meant Rency had to face immense danger. He might even explode because of it. When Glassdale aimed to shoot the arrow to kill both Noir and Jeanne, he missed, and that very arrow caused Noir to fall into a deep abyss. The French people were overjoyed to see Jeanne victorious, contrary to Astaroth's earlier predictions. After swallowing the Philosopher's Stone, Rency didn't experience any physical issues, but it brought about a much more dangerous consequence. Suddenly, countless black clouds appeared in the sky, followed by thousands of monsters surrounding the entire area. Who would have thought that Rency's love would lead to such a dreadful outcome? The fifth dimension had been activated. Even Astaroth hadn't expected the Philosopher's Stone to go out of control like this. Rency had thought that if the stone went out of control, only he would die, but why did it cause such chaos? He asked Hire to help take Jeanne and Astaroth away from there so he could face the monsters alone. The Babylon Pit had been activated. Rency's body was overtaken by the monsters. He transformed into a half-human, half-demon being and was sucked into that Babylon Pit. There, he encountered the Divine King, who said that for a mere human like Rency to want to seal him was truly audacious. The Divine King said that he was the one who created humanity. Slaying a god was a great sin. When humans are without a ruler, they will unleash all of their desires and ambitions and endlessly fight among themselves. The peace maintained in this world exists only because humans are ruled by him. Another god appeared and sealed the Divine King. He told Astaroth that this would be their final meeting. He said that not all gods had vanished. There was still one goddess left in this world, and that was Astaroth. He hoped that she would bestow blessings upon humanity in his place. The future of heaven would lie in her hands. After destroying the Divine King, he gradually disappeared. The moment that man vanished was also the moment Renzi completely turned into a demon. In truth, the Divine King had taken over his body. That demonic being destroyed an entire fortress in just a few short seconds. He wanted to create a perfect paradise for himself. But before that, what he had to do was purge humanity. He wanted all humans to disappear from this world so that he could recreate it anew. This event unfolded exactly as Nicholas Flamel had prophesied. He appeared and said that he should have resolved to eliminate Renzi the moment he was born. But he had wanted to believe that humans could overcome fate, that the power of love could save humanity and change destiny. Hire asked Astaroth to explain what was happening there, but Astaroth said that even if she knew what was going on, there was no way to stop it anymore. Nicholas Flamel was their last hope. He came from an organization founded to create paradise for humanity. By humanity, everyone else fled in fear into the city. But Astaroth alone did not. The enemy they now faced was one of the gods. The monster targeted Astaroth directly and called her a great sinner. He had dreamed of taking revenge on her for thousands of years. Thinking back, perhaps everything was a curse, the curse of the gods wanting to return from the world of humans. Nicholas Flamel declared that this was the world of humans. He created a magic circle to trap the monster, wanting him to experience a human invention, alchemy. This world needed neither gods nor philosopher's stones. Paradise must be built by humans and for humans. But his magic circle was quickly destroyed by the monster. To the monster, it was nothing more than a petty trick. He flung Flamel far away, and now his target was Astaroth. He told her that humans were not their masters. Humans were full of ambition and fought each other over trivial things. If they were not ruled, they would lose paradise forever. Astaroth said that he could not kill her because she was the guardian of the philosopher's stone. The monster said that she might not die, but he could kill her countless times. He said he would kill her again and again without end. Seeing the dark clouds in the sky descend, Hire prepared to use the philosopher's stone to gain Ulysses' power and fight against the English. Alenson warned her that using the stone without elixir was extremely dangerous. Hire planned to awaken Renzi before the poison spread and kiss him to obtain the elixir. She said she would definitely bring Renzi back to Jeanne. Astaroth was suffering terribly at the hands of the demon. He tried to crush her in his hand, but whenever she died from the torment, she would quickly resurrect again. Hire asked Astaroth how she could take Renzi's body back from the demon. Astaroth said that they only needed to remove the philosopher's stone from him, and he would return to being the normal Renzi, and the Divine King would once again be sealed in the sky. The monster inside Renzi's body continued to charge at Hire, but she shot them all down with her gun. She said that the world she lived in, though full of war, still had a girl who sacrificed herself to protect it. She couldn't let that girl cry, so she would do everything she could to bring Renzi back for her. She might be a demonic sniper, but this monster wanted to see whether she could shoot the invisible targets he created. Unexpectedly, even without being able to see them, she could still shoot with such precision. Though she was severely injured by the monster, she still forced herself to keep fighting in order to restore Jeanne's smile. She aimed straight at the stone in Renzi's stomach and shot it out, but never expected that the Divine King possessing Renzi's body could pick the stone back up and place it right where it had been. While he was still conscious and not yet fully controlled by the Divine King, Renzi begged Hire to shoot him in the head. Doing so would kill both him and the Divine King, and peace would return to the world. However, before Hire could act, the Divine King once again took control of Renzi's body. His painful screams awakened Jeanne. The girl reawakened her Ulysses' power and ran to Renzi. She demanded to know why he had promised to protect her for life and now wanted to die. She wanted to beat him until he came to his senses and returned to being her Renzi. In his panic, Renzi saw a horrifying vision: Jeanne being shunned by the people, burned because she had lied about her purity. Renzi had completely transformed into someone else. This person was named Enlil. He claimed himself to be the ruler of heaven, king of the 72 gods. The spirit of Father Philip kept urging her to kill Enlil so she could become the holy maiden who would rule over both kingdoms, England and France, and then use that as the foundation to restore the Burgundy regime. She held a trump card in her hand, Glassdale, who would give her the power to fight anyone. Glassdale told her that once Renzi transformed into Ulysses, he would be able to block Glassdale's arrows using spirit energy. Noir ordered Glassdale to sacrifice Jeanne to initiate the ignition. She decided to borrow Glassdale's power to take revenge on Renzi. Enlil summoned a barrage of invisible blades to attack Jeanne and Hire. Their time as Ulysses was running out. Hire said she would become Jeanne's shield so the girl could destroy Renzi's head. Jeanne was connected to his heart, so she must be the one who understood best that the person before them was no longer Renzi. Hire charged forward, continuously shooting at the monster. But it had no effect. After much hesitation, Jeanne decided to attack Renzi as well. But she too was thrown far away by him. It seemed like everything would end there. Enlil summoned countless bizarre monsters to wipe out all of humanity. He had no intention of killing Renzi to take the Philosopher's Stone. He said he would use Renzi's body as a vessel to maintain his form and consciousness. Becoming the only god to possess a vessel, heaven would be restored by him. The world would return to its original state, but humans would no longer have a place in it. The next generation of slaves would be created in the form of monsters, who would only obey orders without the ability to think. Would the ridiculous ending that this demon spoke of truly come to pass for this world? Astereth said she was the one who defied the gods if punishment was necessary. Then punish her and spare the humans here. Enlil wanted her to stay right where she was and witness the end of this false heaven. Noir suddenly rushed in and hugged Enlil from behind. Glassdale used this chance to fire an arrow at him. But Jeanne caught the arrow. She said Renzi was still here. Noir was struck down by Enlil, but she had passed her power on to Jeanne so that the girl could reach Renzi's heart. Now Jeanne was the only one who could sense his presence. After receiving that power, Jeanne rushed forward and kissed Renzi. At that moment, she felt transported to another dimension. When she asked a passerby about Renzi, he pointed her toward the magic school that young Renzi and his friends had once attended. Time seemed to be turning back to the past. When Renzi and Ricamont sat talking about alchemy and the Philosopher's Stone, Jeanne rushed in to find Renzi, telling him about the memories they had shared. She told him how he had saved her, how they had gone through so much together, and that he had said he would never marry and would always stay by her side, but Renzi didn't recognize her at all. This made her deeply sad. Time shifted once more, and Jeanne found herself at the castle of Renzi's grandfather. She saw Renzi and Catherine standing before many graves. He told her those were his younger sister's girls who had been lured to the castle and died in the tower. Longing to return home and be with their families, they had all cried when they arrived, but eventually died in despair. He couldn't save any of them. Catherine tried to comfort him, saying it wasn't his fault, it was his grandfather's. He knew that war had turned his grandfather into such a person. In this chaotic world, only the strong survive. If you don't betray others, they will betray you. In such a world, people are forced to become as cruel as his grandfather to survive. Only when the war ends can everything come to an end. That's why he had devoted his entire youth to studying alchemy. Jeanne told him she wanted him to come back to the real world with her. As long as they worked together, they could end the war. He told her he could see both past and future, and in the future, he had seen her burned alive by the people because they doubted her purity. They walked together to the village where they first met. Though it was an artificial world, Renzi wanted to stay there forever. In this world, there was no war or chaos, no magic, but he could be with a person he loved. All he needed was Jeanne, but Jeanne didn't feel the same to her. Even though the real world was full of pain, it was still beautiful. Even if she might die upon returning, she could still stay by Renzi's side by living on in the hearts of the people if they could drive out the English army. She succeeded in persuading Renzi to return to reality with her, and the demon could no longer possess his body. Together, they decided to use the power of Ulysses to fight Enlil. They wanted to rebuild the history of this world together. Enlil, of course, wouldn't allow it. He believed everything the world had was created by him, and he would never allow humans to rule it. In a critical moment, Jeanne asked Renzi to give her more elixir so she could fully unleash the power of Ulysses. They fought in perfect coordination, and before long, Jeanne had severed the demon's head. They realized that this monster wasn't so terrifying if they stood united. The people and the army cheered and celebrated their victory. But for Noir, it still wasn't over. Her father's spirit kept reminding her that if the Princess of France were crowned, England would fall into crisis. She had to eliminate the root of the problem, Jeanne. But how could she do that? Jeanne was the person Rency, her friend, loved most. She raised her sword to harm Jeanne, but in the end, she couldn't do it. Instead, she turned and asked Glassdale to end her life. She no longer wanted to live in the hatred of her father. Glassdale only shattered the helmet that turned her into Ulysses and refused to harm her. The English army couldn't believe that France had won through Ulysses and divine power. Excalibur wanted the English forces to retreat from France. This news was quickly reported to Rency. The war had temporarily ended, and the people of Orleans held a grand celebration of victory. They said they would never forget this great achievement. Hire, Alençon, and Batard received tremendous rewards after the battle. But Rency's situation wasn't so fortunate. Jeanne had heard that he had kissed Hire, so she became upset with him. Even though Rency explained that he only did it to give her elixir and had no romantic feelings, the girl still couldn't calm her anger. She thought he wanted to make Hire his second wife. Princess Charlotte was overjoyed when she heard that Jeanne was safe. She ran over and kissed Jeanne all over, then thanked Hire for saving both Jeanne and Rency. She granted Rency the title of General of France, in order to gain trust and continue the fight. He was forced to accept the title. The French nobility still hadn't truly united. They would surely scheme against Jeanne again. From today on, he would become the highest-ranking commander in France. He said he would accept the title under one condition. The princess must make peace with Richemont. Astaroth wanted to leave and go somewhere else, but Rency stopped her. She said he should have noticed something strange about her from the beginning. She was one of the divine kings who created this world. She had approached him only to use him for alchemy. Rency said he didn't care who she was or where she came from. What he felt from her was an endless love for this place. She never meant to harm humans. He wasn't angry at her for hiding her true identity. On the contrary, he wanted her to stay and witness humanity rebuild this world. She was the goddess who could bestow blessings upon mankind. To protect Noir, Glassdale lied to the commander, saying she had fallen off a cliff during the battle. The commander didn't quite believe it, but accepted it and gave Glassdale the next mission. Under his protection, Philip safely returned to her homeland to live the peaceful life she had always dreamed of. Philip had become stronger, no longer manipulated by her father's words. She had her own will now. She wanted to live a normal life, not one constantly driven by revenge. Rency took Jeanne to see Catherine. They thought the girl might be angry about the marriage, but she wasn't. She only came to say that if one day she was no longer around, she hoped Catherine could stay by Rency's side to keep him company. This greatly surprised them both. He was deeply moved by what Jeanne had done for him. He had a beautiful dream in which he stood in a lush green field, enjoying the gentle breeze. In that moment, the war had ended completely. Peace had returned, and he could once again hear the laughter of the one he loved. That night, he found Jeanne standing near the fountain. When he approached and asked, she said she had a nightmare, so he stayed to comfort her. Perhaps she had once again dreamed of being burned alive by villagers who doubted her virginity. After that, they sat and talked all night in front of the castle. Orleans had been liberated, and the English army had retreated a good distance. The princess asked for Rency's opinion on the next plan of action. Rency said they would march straight to Reims, where they would crown the princess as the Queen of France. Richemont also wanted to support the French royal family. Rency said that as a general, he couldn't decide such things on his own. It was up to the princess to issue such orders. Richemont asked the princess directly. Though shy in front of her friend, Charlotte also wanted to reconcile with Richemont. She said she had already granted her a noble title, so she could return to the French royal family whenever she wished. It seemed the princess had also learned how to humble herself, and the two of them made peace with each other. They happily set off together for Reims to begin the journey of rebuilding a new world for humanity. Along the way, Jeanne asked Rency how babies were made. She wanted to have a baby with him. This made him blush with embarrassment. Hearing this, Hire immediately warned Rency not to do anything inappropriate while Jeanne was still underage. They all seemed to have grown closer, chatting joyfully as they marched forward. Hopefully, The war would end soon and return peace to everyone's lives.